for auditing Professor Skye's Record Review, the only always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor with a map of Dublin hiding behind his back. I have Dublin up there because today I'm going to be reviewing an album by Fontaines D.C, which does not stand for District of Columbia, you Americans like me who has an American-centric bias. It stands for Dublin City, and their new album, Hero's Death. A Hero's Death. I don't know what's happening, but it seems as though everything I'm reviewing is either female-led pop music, hip-hop, or post-punk. I don't know what it is about rock and roll music, but it seems as though all the good rock and roll music that's being made right now fits in this very nebulous category of post-punk. You see behind me, I have the Proto-Martyr album. I bought it because my son liked it so much. That fits in there, and it made me realize, what is it about post-punk? Now, I've been talking about this on the last few videos. If you read the definition on the internet, on Wikipedia, departing from the simplicity of traditional punk, adopting avant-garde sensibilities. Okay, that's true. But the thing about post-punk is that it's so grand. It's such a large category that it encompasses acts like New Order and Proto-Martyr, right? Like, how does that all kind of fit in together? So, the term I want to come up with, and this might be totally stupid, or it might have been already done, but I think we need to come up with a new subcategory of post-punk. Because I do think that post-punk is important. I think it's a correct idea that the rawness, the aggression of punk music, then being tailored slightly with other sensibilities, does deserve its own category. But what it made me think of when I listened to this band, this album, which is quite good, I'm going to get into it in detail, as you can tell by the run length of this video, I'm sure, is it's not just that it's post-punk. It's that it's post-punk that sounds like proto-punk. Okay, Skye. Okay, Professor. Just start throwing out terminology, but let me explain. So when I'm talking about proto-punk, I'm talking about groups like Velvet Underground or groups like The Stooges, groups that came before punk music, that announced that the rawness was coming, that the hardness was coming, that the dissonance, that the anxiety, that the aggression was all coming. But it wasn't quite yet there. Music had not been completely destroyed. The reason that I want to make this distinction clear is that punk itself developed into new wave music. I don't know if that's generally accepted, but that's the way I see it. The new wave was really just everyone who was making punk all of a sudden was like, hey, what if we had a keyboard? So what do we do with music that has some of this punk sensibility that comes after punk, but does not have any keyboard or any electronic elements? I think that's why we need to define this kind of music as post-protopunk. It's obnoxious, but I like the term. Just hear me out. Post-protopunk. So it's not jumping over punk, because it had to have punk in the middle, but it's taking those pre-punk sensibilities and recreating them in the post-punk world. That's why I don't think that we can compare groups like Fontaines D.C. to many other bands that we consider to be proto-punk. And the main element is no computers and no keyboard. We're talking guitar. This album is outstanding. It's bizarre because I've listened to it maybe 5 or 6 times, and every time I like it more. It's a deceptively catchy album. It's an album, in fact, where almost every song is super catchy, but it's catchy by blunt force repetition. They just say, operate it faster, operate it faster, operate it faster. Until you're just like, yeah, this song's okay. And then 2 minutes later, operate it faster. I don't belong to anyone. Like, every single track has this just so much repetition, but it's not done gratuitously, and it doesn't feel cheap. It's guitar-led, but it's also drum-led. There's one song on here that's just pure drums. The drums are often very high in the mix, very pulsing drums. Great singer, kind of, again, a sort of weird post-proto-punk style of half singing, half talking throughout much of it. This band is from Dublin, but this lead singer has like a very British accent. Am I wrong? Can you please tell me, British people who watch my channel, which according to the analytics are very few of you, why does this guy sound British to me? Do I just not know what an Irish accent sounds like? Am I just like polluted by culture to think that that's not what an Irish person sounds like. I don't know. At times, what this music reminds me of is things that I like about the Swans, actually. That kind of like deep voice and rumbling feeling. Every song manages to hit this atmosphere, which is at times kind of dreamy, but it's kind of like a groggy half sleep, you know? Like none of it's like sleepy, but it's like, it's not dreamy where you feel like you're on top of a cloud. It's more like that part, like just before you fall asleep. That kind of twilight feeling to it dominates much of the album, which I think is really quite nice. For the most part, the songs are very simple. Sometimes they'll just be one riff or one basic sequence of chords, and they lay down the basis, and then they'll add little things on top of it, like add a guitar line, or they'll take some things out. One song I'll get to later, they take out the bass, and I almost passed out. It made me so like anxious that they took the bass out. Just slight shifts within this pocket. And I think if they wanted to, they could do a remix album of this record that was 4 hours long, and every song could be a half an hour long of just the groove that they set, and just let it go, because they build so much space into this music without ever having it feel empty. Lyrically, according to the press release that I read on Bandcamp, it's a heady and philosophical take on the modern world and its great uncertainty. That's pretty boring. Actually, the lyrics are more interesting than that. The lyricists, I don't know if there's more than one, the lyrics on this have a certain style where they have a catchy title that seems somewhat banal, and then there's a plus. So like the first track is called I Don't Belong. So you think, oh, I don't belong must mean like I'm an outsider. But no, it's I don't belong to anyone. Aha, a little plus, right? In general, many of the songs on here have that sort of simple title with a little added thing when you actually listen to the music. In general, it's not a hopeless album, but it does seem to be an exasperated album. An album that's exasperated with the state of affairs, sort of in the Radiohead area of just kind of like observing and commenting in an ironic register about the way the world is. But at the same time, there are songs on here that seem to be pointing towards hopefulness. Am I misreading that? If you are a Fontaines D.C. fan, could you please let me know? Like, are they actually as hopeful as they seem for much of this album? What I'm going to do now, I'm just going to play you a little bit of the title track, A Hero's Death. I'm going to get into it more later, but I just want to give you a sense, 7 minutes in here, of what this album sounds like, the atmosphere they're able to establish. I think that map is going to fall down. That'll be something else for you to pay attention to during this video. So here is A Hero's Death. Listen to the guitar, listen to this great repetition, the strength of this voice, this British voice. This guy doesn't sound Irish to me, but I don't want to piss people off because I know there's a small history of tension there. Let's have a little listen here. So, life ain't always empty. Just keeps going. And it gets into your head. You just start singing this. You just get it in your head. It's just very simple playing. Nice harmonies in the back. Life ain't always empty. Life ain't always empty. Life ain't always empty. Until you find yourself, like I've been for the last 2 days, having one of their songs stuck in my head at all times. So, let's go through track by track. It is the summer. I turn off the air conditioning so that you don't hear that. So if I'm sweating a lot, that's why. It's okay. The channel used to be called Skye's Sweaty Record Reviews before I changed it. So the opening track, I Don't Belong, as I've mentioned, it might be my favorite track on the album. I don't know. There's so many good ones on here. Just a really good, strong drum, very riffy guitar. The guitar in here often sounds like Western guitar, like single notes played very loudly with just certainty. Like they're not trying to be like gnarly and metal, but the guitar line is like, if you ever play guitar, if you don't press down hard enough, it makes a certain sound. Or if you're too close to one of the little fret markers, it makes a certain sound. You get the sense that every note that's played by this guitar player is in the dead center of the fret with his finger firmly down. And ding, like there's a real tactile satisfaction here. And again, the repetition of, I don't belong to anyone, is interesting because when he sings it the first time, I don't belong to anyone, the second time you want him to sing, I don't belong to you. Like you want him to go somewhere. He could go somewhere else with this, but he just keeps saying, I don't belong to anyone. And it's a great song. It's a really great, very catchy song. I could have played that and that would be stuck in your head as well. Next track is completely led by the drums. The drums make you anxious. There is an element to this music where sometimes it makes you anxious. Not all the time, but sometimes. The Dr. and Mrs. Payne, my wife, she does not like music that makes you anxious. So I skipped this one when we listened. She loves this album, by the way, but I always skip this song because this makes me anxious. Just riding the crash and the thump. I think it's a 4 on the floor drum beat. Good example of that Western style guitar. Very kind of bizarre lyrics. Love is the main thing. Some nice lyrics here. Tired of embracing, using and wasting. Always aloning. Nice. Always aloning. Turning alone into a present participle. Always aloning. And then it ends with this really cool thing where that drum line is going and the guitars are doing something else and they're actually going at different rhythms, kind of a polyrhythm there, quite nice. Televised Mind is a little bit more bass-led. The drums are way back in the mix on here. What I call his chunky, plunky guitar playing. And it's very nice, kind of a descending guitar line, constantly saying, that's a televised mind. I don't know what that's a televised mind means. I like it. I don't need to understand what it means. I get the concept. That's a televised mind. The kind of lyric which in my life, I will now be thinking that. I will look at something and go, oh, hey, that's a televised mind, without ever knowing even what I mean. A Lucid Dream, that's the song where the bass drops out. Try it, okay? Just do me a favor. Listen to this song. It freaked me out. Because like the song is just going along. It's one of these great things where they set the tableau and they got the lyrics and they got the atmosphere and then the bass drops out. And I felt like there were cockroaches in my shirt, like right under there. Could you imagine having like a cockroach laying babies right under there? That's how I felt. You Said, another nice kind of guitar line. This is the one that has the operating faster, which is the line that they repeat over and over again. Try operating faster, try operating faster. This is kind of in that Radiohead thing, that theme of the tyranny of utility and productiveness, which they are fighting against, which I think is one of the main themes of post-punk music, if we could look at it all as a genre, and proto-punk music for that matter. Anything related to punk is against the tyranny of productivity. Hooray. So that's a good point. I'm going to develop that later. You Said is, this one I already said. Oh Such a Spring is an example of where they get kind of sad and wistful. They have some downbeat songs here. This reminds me a lot of Beautiful Day by Lou Reed. You hear the accent very strong in here as well. Really nice lyrics here. Things like sailors were drinking American wine. I don't really know what that means, but as an American, like that's gross. Why would you be drinking American wine? If you were in Ireland, why would you be drinking American wine? That's terrible. A Hero's Death is the song I just played for you. It's interesting because the line is, life ain't always empty. This is a great example of a good news, bad news lyric. Good news is, life ain't always empty. Bad news is, the term always, the word always is in that sentence, which means that life is often empty. I first heard this and thought he said, life isn't always into you. So I thought it was like life isn't always in love with you, and it's much more of a sad song. But really quite nice. The lyrics here, I'll read you some of them. You heard some of them when I sang them to you before. Don't get stuck in the past. Say your favorite things at mass. Tell your mother that you love her and go out of your way for others. Sit beneath a light that suits you and look towards a brighter future. I don't know. Is this ironic? Is it not? The artwork that I showed you is tied into this title, A Hero's Death. Apparently, this is a statue that is at the Dublin Post Office, and it's of, let me look at my notes here, oh no. Oh my God, is that a coincidence? I started mispronouncing Gaelic, and the map fell. Chúlainn, who died a hero's death. He was hit by a magic spear, and then he tied himself to a rock to prevent falling over. So he'd always face his enemies while he was dying. It sounds like some lame toxic masculinity to me, but hey, what do I know? That's the image. Then we get to the song Living in America, which is not the James Brown. I was hoping for a cover of the James Brown song, Living in America. Terrible song. It's terrible. What happened to James Brown? Whole nother video. Again, not quite a song, just kind of an idea. The drum line is going, the very low voice. Like, he does a lot of that in this song. That sound, right? Very much, this is a band that is at ease with ominous sounds and at ease with silence. I don't know what the song is about. At times, the singer sort of has a couple different registers, a couple different places that he goes. This is one which reminds me a lot of Johnny Rotten, a term I kind of use, bratty punk, like, meh, like, America. Like, there are times where I was listening to this album, and I sort of had to, like, turn it down a little bit, because the, like, yes, sir, kind of like my goat, that kind of sound. I don't quite know, but it's really quite nice. I Was Not Born is a little bit surprising because it starts off with very bright guitars, like chords, and the other instruments come in. I read in a review of this album that this is allegedly a very Beach Boys inspired album. I don't buy it. I mean, I buy it that it was influenced, but I don't buy that you can hear the influence that clearly, except on a song like Here, where there's a little bit of harmonies, a little bit of like interesting modular production, but in general, I don't really quite hear it here. But the depth of the production in general on the album is really strong. So maybe that's just it, that they're spending, I haven't heard their first album. Is it good? Tell me in the comments. I guess I could have reviewed it. It came out last year. But in general, the depth and the ability to create this atmosphere in a very rich environment is really quite strong. This is a great example of a song that has both what I call his M. Gira style and his Johnny Rotten style kind of together. Then the track Sunny comes in with like slightly detuned guitars, echoed and bright. Pretty cool. Maybe this is the Beach Boys aspect, because there's kind of like a harmony and rounds going on in the background, and then the strong Western guitar comes in. This is also sort of the dreamy aspect of this album. And then the album ends with No. Very whiny vocals, intense, maybe too much at times. Here, the guitar sounds intentionally a little bit buzzed, like the action is not okay. Like, remember how I was saying how the notes are super strong? Here, they sound a little bit weak, but I think that's intentional. I think that's a fragility built in to the song on purpose, by good musicians who are making good music. I think that that's what they're trying to do, that the whole album, the guitar has just been so, and then here it sounds like the action is just not quite right. Like they need to fix the guitar. Very, very British accent. Here they actually quote Velvet Underground. He uses the term twisted and unkind, which comes from I'll Be Your Mirror off of their first album. And this one is just 2 chords. And looking at it, most of their songs are just a couple chords. But again, they just set this environment, and then they do some things in the environment, and then they move on to the next song. It builds quite nicely, though, here. More mystical lyrics. This is, again, an example of their positivity, because they say a bunch of bad things, and then they end a verse with yeah, right? Things like, and we know what freedom brings, the awful songs it makes you sing. But then they save the no of the title for listing bad things. There's no living to a life where all your fears are running rife, and you are mugged by your belief that you owe it all to grief. No. No. So that's great. This, right? Don't believe that you owe everything to grief. It ends up being an upbeat thing. And it's funny, the way that no is delivered, I swear, there's some kind of cultural movement happening here. Apparently Idols are a band that I should be listening to that is in this realm as well. I apologize. I'm not a music professor. I'm a French professor. This is my hobby. But I think, like at least Proto Martyr and this band, and I assume based on what I've heard of the Idols, there might be some kind of really great, like, guitar-based post-Protopunk thing happening here, where there's a lot of great music going on and some similarities. Like the way that he says no in this song reminds me of the way they say lies in Believed by the Boys, whatever that one is. What's that? What is it? What is that? It's like being belayed by the boys, being delayed, being beaconed, processed. being processed by the boys. The way that they say lies in that, the way they say no here, there's like this weird strength to like certain words being delivered, indicating that what you believe is false, which matches our time because so much of what we believe is false. This is sort of a great era for believing in false things because they make us comfortable or because they reinforce negative feelings that we already feel about ourselves, which is a result of the internet. So maybe all this post-protopunk music is helping to correct that by helping us to see things more clearly without trying to paper over it and make it seem more cheery and optimistic than it has any business being. Like a sort of realistic pessimism, which leaves a lot of room for realistic optimism, as opposed to a kind of a performative desperation. Could you watch that again, the last minute? Because I think that was pretty good, but I didn't write it down. I'm going to watch that again. I think that's pretty good. Realistic optimism and realistic pessimism. That's what we need. And that's what this music is providing. So there you go. The album ends, even when you don't know, you feel. Those are the last words of the album. And I think it is a lot of what makes this a good album. Even when you don't know what he's saying, even when you don't know what the point is, you feel. It is an album that you feel. It's an album that you like. It's an album that you respond to. Whew. Okay, well then, for my excellent map of Ireland, which I will have to fix, I got this for free when my wife ordered me the sweater from Knives Out, that big chunky sweater. Maybe you've seen my Morrissey episode. I think it's in there. I'll fix that later. Okay, well, for Chris Evans and the shark sticker behind me, there's the camera.